it's most important to be clear on what you want. And I think just starting there and really, giving some voice to this idea, because being clear on what you want and that being the only thing you're in charge of is really hard for those of us leaders that are controlling.
This is Becoming, the podcast for leaders to think differently with actionable tips in 30 minutes or less to claim your intuition, your influence, and your agency. And finally, get to the truth of what stands between you and who you are meant to become. Many of us believe that once we become that future self, then we will be happy, successful, and complete. This podcast exists to shine a light on the truth that the time is now and your future self can be who you become today.
Hello, podcast listeners. Welcome back to another episode of Becoming. I am joined today by our dear Abbey. Welcome, Abbey.
Thank you. As always, good to be back.
Yes. So today we are unpacking the how. We are unpacking the lie of worrying about the how and how that also ties into limitations of things like time, of resources. And I'm super excited about today's conversation because Abbey always brings a unique perspective, but the collaboration between the two of us always creates something we weren't even expecting. So we're excited to unpack this with you and dive into the importance of how, of course, but how it also limits us.
Let's see how many times we can say how when not talking about how.
Exactly. So most of you have heard this concept of it's not our responsibility to know the how. It's not our responsibility to worry about the how. That's the universe's job. That's God's job. Whatever you believe in, it's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to know what it is that you want and have an unwavering approach to that destination, being open to the path and how it unfolds. But the challenge can be when you're either not clear about where you're going or something externally gets you off track and something externally happens and it causes you to waver, right? We've all been there. We've all been there where we are fiercely moving forward. We are fiercely on our way to the destination or outcome that's so important to us. And something externally happens to get us off track. Many of us can look at that as, oh, I'm just being tested to see how important this is. How committed am I to this outcome? Are these tests, right? These things that pop up. And so first of all, I want to start today's episode with highlighting it's most important to be clear on what you want. And I think just starting there and really, giving some voice to this idea, because being clear on what you want and that being the only thing you're in charge of is really hard for those of us leaders that are controlling, right? We want to micromanage the manifestation process. I think that is a mic drop moment, right? It's like, I know for me, it's like, I love to micromanage the manifestation process until I'm not manifesting. So that kind of gives me the first point to ask you about, Abbey. What has been your experience in your journey of just being clear on what you want and how important that first step is in the process?
So good. The reason I'm pausing is because there's a little nuance I think I would add to that actually right off the bat. And I absolutely, just to piggyback first, to be clear on what you want, absolutely. And know that what you want is not external. Even though it appears that way, you are what you want. You have everything that you need already that you want. So that's where I would segue that. But I let me put it this way. I have a visual because I love visuals to start off and set the stage, even on what what how looks like, what it does when we focus so much on it. And then I'll get back to your question on want. But it's like, we've all been to the beach before, right? And you scoop up sand in your hand, right? So imagine that sand is what you want. That's what your part is, right? You want the sand in your hand. That's your goals. That's your desired outcome, the thing that you're trying to manifest. And when you have this sand in your hand, right, you have it like a cup here. Your hand is in a receiving position. Your hand is open, it's expansive, it's allowing space. There's things that can land in it. You're holding it. And I think this key to holding the vision, holding what you want is the key part in what you're talking about. But then if you think about, okay, what happens when you close your hand, right? When you close your hand and you're trying to grasp so tightly onto that thing you want, when you're constricted, when you're smaller, when you're trying to control that which is in your hand, that what you want, what happens? All that sand comes through your fingers. It eludes you. The more you try to grasp onto it in that energy, the sand seeps through your fingers. So I think that's like a great example of thinking about what you want. And yes, you have to hold that vision, because you can have anything that you want, but you have to be able to hold it too. And I think that's the missing like point when we talk a lot about manifestation, because like we said, we're co-creators. This idea and certainty, which I'll talk about, that you can have anything you want, that's just step one, the wanting part. But it's how do you sustain that and keep the things that you want, which is like a deeper layer. And we all know, if you've been following along the Unpacking series, that I love words, right? And they speak to me. And sometimes the words itself tell us the truth, like right in the words about what it means. And two things came to mind when I started thinking about how. The first one is the word ow is in how. OW, like ow, pain, right? Pain and suffering. The more in that visual where our hand is constricted, the more we want that thing and we're trying to force it, control it, micromanage it, like you said, right? That is the painful process that we are, in essence, accountable for ourselves. We're the problem and the solution in that example. We're causing the ow and trying to do the how and figure out every single step of the process. But the reason I said I take it deeper and go from want, I would actually change that to not just what you want, but who you're being, because that's the other word in how. If you shifted the letters in how, instead of it being ow, it's who. Who you are being is going to be the game changer in sustaining it and holding it. That's where that certitude comes in. One of our core values that we've talked about in previous episodes, because using an example of what I want, let's say we want to call in $1 million in revenue in the company, right? If I'm trying to do that and I am, like in the sand example, chasing the clients, grinding, I'm losing sleep, I'm not taking care of myself, I'm becoming resentful because I'm sacrificing and tolerating other things to put that energy into whatever. I'm not really clear on who it is I'm trying to target from like the energy of trying to serve. It's more like, get it done, get it. I want this. This is all I'm getting. So my only eye is on making the $1 million, right? That's a different energy than if I were to look at who I'm being and say, I'm coming from the energy of serving. I want to show up. I know that what I have is valuable. I can become who I want right now in this moment. And this is the open. I can just hold the vision of what I want. And I can hold that vision right now. And that energy becomes not chasing. That becomes, I'm showing up. I'm paying attention to who I'm being. I'm aware. It's mindful presence. Everything I do is, again, with character, integrity. There's a certain energy that I'm bringing every day that's attracting the clients that we want. So when we get that $1 million, we can hold it. Because in that first example, when we get that $1 million, we might be not in a position to scale the company. We might be losing even more time with our friends and family that we thought that thing that we wanted was going to give to us. That's then trickling into the energy we're bringing to our clients. So maybe they cancel and that $1 million in revenue now goes away in the blink of an eye. Whereas in that second example, who I'm being, integrity, in character, in alignment right now, holding the vision, holding the sand of what I want, that $1 million, that's going to bring in clients who not only resonate, like we talked about alignment on the last podcast episode, but that's when they're going to give referrals. That's when that $1 million grows exponentially. We don't have to figure out the how they're going to come. It's the who. So it's kind of, that was a long-winded answer, but I think there's certainty. You can have certitude in who you're being right now. And just when we look at that word, how interesting it is, we can either choose the energy of ow and pain and suffering and trying to, squeeze that sand, or we can choose the energy of who am I right now? And let me just hold this vision so I can sustain it. When I get that thing that I want, I don't have to change anything because I've been this all along. This is who I am.
Yeah. That was so awesome. Thank you for taking our listeners on that journey, because I think that unpacked like so much of what we want to communicate in this episode today, because I think like leaders are so good at setting the vision, and it's the holding of it, and it's what you do. And let me actually rephrase this. It's who you choose to be when everything outside shows you to give up.
Yes.
Right? It's who you choose to be that defines who you are and the clients you attract and the future, and really the realization of the how. And I think that's what I got from what you just said more than anything, is like who you are being is the investment we all need to make, right? The who we're being is what we need to focus on, instead of the how is this going to happen? How are the clients going to come? Or how am I going to realize the vision? Whatever your vision might be, it's most important to look at if you're a match to what you want versus the how.
Yes.
I feel like something else is bubbling in you, Abby. Do you want to say something else on that?
No, I absolutely, I just, I love words. I just think it's so funny that the word ow and who are in that word. And it comes always, like you said, it's who we are becoming. It's how we open up the podcast episode, right? Who you're becoming could be who you are today, right now. Like it is fundamentally that. And I think we've talked about this in previous episodes. It's just the questions you ask yourself. And how is a question, right? It's the caliber of questions that are going to determine the caliber of results. So if I'm asking the question, how, you have an episode on a previous podcast about disorder and problems, right? If you're in the energy of always trying to figure out how, you're trying, you're moving, you're hustling, you're resisting. It's like the thing is always one step ahead of you because you're in the energy of trying. And if you're in the energy of trying, then you're always going to be in the energy of trying. And that's what you're attracting, instead of an elevated perspective where you increase that consciousness and you're looking at it from, it's already done. It's not separate from me. I already know with certainty it's mine. I can have it. And you're in a different mindset that allows you to then see solutions and have unwavering confidence that is yours already. So all you see is, oh, I'm now excited because there's so many different ways that this can come to me. It's like a game now. Like, how is this going to come? Because I already know it is. So if you're only focused on the question of how, it becomes this like lack energy, this fear-based energy versus this excitement energy. And what we could do instead is focus on why. That's a much better question when we're thinking about manifestation, because again, why is more curiosity, why is more exciting, and why will also help you figure out the true root of what you want. Because you might think you want a new car, okay? You might think you want a new luxury car that's going to bring you want the ability to get up and go and all of this stuff. And if you are trying to figure out all the ways to get this new luxury car and you get it, and then you're like, wait a minute, okay, I have this car and still something's like not right. Whereas if you asked, why do I want the luxury car? Really, ultimately, you boil down to, I want freedom. It's not even about the car or the luxury or anything. I want the ability to get up and go, to drive myself to places and do whatever I want. So it's the core value conversation we had in previous episodes too. And when you're able to figure out the why, it brings so many different ways that can come to you. So maybe when you're in alignment because of what you're asking, why, that gets you more excited and you get to the root of, you know what, it's freedom I want. Well, freedom, let's say you ended up manifesting a free train pass, right? Free train pass to go anywhere you want at any time. And that looks very different than the how you were trying to force by getting this car. But when you get this free train pass to go anywhere, you realize, wow, in hindsight, as I'm on this train looking out this window and I feel this sense of freedom and I'm so excited and inspired, and like in hindsight, if I got that car, I would have got what I wanted, but I would have had to find parking. It would have cost me a butt ton of money. It would have created resentment because I got to put extra money in fixing it and gas or whatever. But ultimately, I just wanted the ability to feel free and see the world. So you still get what you want. It just may not look like what you want it to, but it opens up different avenues you didn't even know were possible to bring in that core value. So it's the freedom, and that can come from a free train pass for the year, or that can come in I can go anywhere I want internally and travel internally too. That's the freedom that I also get when I let go of that external thing and ask, why do I want it? I want it because I want to feel like I have adventure. You can go and adventure in your mind, in your heart. And then when you're in that alignment and you're feeling and cultivating those exciting feelings, even knowing it's coming to you, like that's what then attracts it. So I love just how you've set up this whole podcast too, because if people have been listening from like the beginning to episode 1 to now, it's almost like this foundational framework that was set up from understanding, the addictions, in each one of those addiction patterns, and then also like understanding how important and fundamental your whys are, which are your core values and what drive you, all the way through how to use those to actually accelerate your alignment and to take those core values into conscious leadership and be who you are, to now we're talking manifestation and forgetting the how, because once you embody all of this series we've already brought you on, it's who you are at this point if you've listened to every episode.
Are you interested in being a guest on our podcast? If so, we'd love the opportunity to speak further with you about your story and about sharing it with our audience. Click the link below in the show notes if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, and one of the Truth Teachers team members will be in touch with you to take the next step.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's so fascinating about this conversation is that, to your point, when we ask better questions, we get better results. Part of what happens when we're trying to figure out the how, or we're stuck in the how, is we are operating from a limited perspective. When I went to the wisdom school in India, one of the monks would say, you have a worm's eye view instead of a bird's eye view. And I think that we have a worm's eye view when we are in the how. And the reason is because we're looking at it from our limited perspective in that moment of what we know based on, most of the time, evidence in the past. So we're creating based on what has worked in the past. When we ask, or rather get stuck in the how and that lower thinking of only seeing the situation in the box that it's in, what happens is we lose connection to higher thought, more expanded thought, and other solutions. And so the biggest thing to really exit needing to know about the how, or how it's going to unfold, is to ask a question. And I find this really, really helpful, is what are all the possibilities of how this could unfold? And actually do an exercise to unlock your brain from figuring out the how, and do a brain dump on what are all of the possibilities that could happen. Because then you get more into that creative space, you get more into what other more empowering questions you can ask yourself, because you're no longer in that trench of how, you're more in the clouds of possibility versus being, in that struggle.
I love that. I always in my head, because we often hear like cliches, especially with manifestation and the how, like we're talking about. And it's like, when we're talking about it, it's like, yeah, great. But like you said, how do I actually not worry about the how, right? And that's one example you just gave. Like when you start writing out the possibilities, it's the intention behind that exercise. You're not trying to control the different possibilities, saying like it has to be A, B, C, or D that I'm writing down. That just gets you excited. You're cultivating that feeling. And we talked about how important emotions are when you're trying to co-create with the universe. That is the fuel that accelerates your alignment and calling in, attracting, and getting you closer to that which you want. So I love that perspective where it's kind of reshifting. You're still writing out the how, but it's not from that same energy, right? That lack energy. This is from lack to excitement and cultivating, and like something's brewing, and like an adventure. And like I said, that game energy, like, oh, it could be this, it could be this. I can't wait to see how it actually unfolds. You're not limiting yourself from that perspective. And one thing I like to do is we've always heard this cliche, like I've said it before too. And I think I even said it at the beginning of this episode. You have everything, right? The how is not external to you. It's not a linear process. Like, I must figure out step A, B, C, D, all the way through Z. That's how we're conditioned to believe. Like if I go to school, if I get the degree, if I start my business, if I have the house, if I get the kids, like this is very step by step that we're like conditioned to do to get success. All of these are external things. The how is not external to you. You are everything already. So I like to imagine this huge like call it a happy tornado inside of me. I close my eyes and I visualize this happy tornado just spinning inside of me. And basically it's this vortex. And in this vortex, I put in all my goals, everything I desire to call in. It's in me. It's in my heart, right? What I want. I want A, I want B, I want this house, I want this type of career, I want whatever. They're all just spinning, spinning, spinning. And so that's so exciting because that spinning energy of like the creation process. And it's just going back to the episode on alignment. If this happy tornado, let's say it's the house I'm trying to call in, or is my desired outcome is to get the dream house. That house in my happy vortex tornado is going 100 miles per hour in this happy tornado, right? And I can feel it spinning. I don't have to focus on the how because I already know it's already inside of me. It's already there. I am it. It is me. I just need to be able to focus on who I'm being. Like I said, what does that mean? How do I align my thoughts, actions, beliefs right now in this moment to be also 100 miles per hour? Because when those things are 100 miles per hour and my happy house, dream house is 100 miles per hour, we match. That's the alignment part that we were talking about. And therefore I call that in. It is mine. So that's my happy tornado exercise where I just picture all these beautiful things spinning and brewing and coming into this beautiful storm of creation, right? It's like the Big Bang when it actually meets the mile per hour and you get that thing, but it's never the outside like you talked about. It already is. It's that certitude and confidence is the core value of ours at the Truth Teachers that we talked about. And it's just unwavering commitment to yourself and trust that it's the part where people say you have to, I'll believe it when I see it, right? That's what how does. It says, again, I have to do X, Y, and Z because I know then, Z, Y, W is going to happen, right? It's that energy. I'll believe it when I see it. So I'm going to control the process so I can see it to believe it. This is the opposite. It's asking you to believe it in here, that certitude. You already have your happy tornado. It has everything you already want to desire in your life right now. It's in there already. It's just a conviction of like, okay, I'm going to believe that. And that's how I'm going to see it. So it's a little bit just opposite.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's giving these little reminders, whether it's the happy tornado, it's such a great example that Abbey gave us, or even just reminding yourself throughout the day, the how is not my responsibility. Mm-hmm. What is my vision? Boom, redirect. The how is not my responsibility. Boom, redirect, right? It doesn't matter if it's 1,000 times today or 2 times tomorrow. Reminding yourself and redirecting your focus is such a huge piece of this. And I think that the other piece around, the how and getting yourself really connected to your vision is asking questions like, if the person that I'm being, let me actually rephrase this. The question would be, am I being the person that is, and I'll just use Abby's example of the $1 million in revenue. Am I being the person that has $1 million company? That's a great question. The next question is, what actions would I take if I was a person that had $1 million company? What would I do today that would be in alignment with being a $10 million company? Those questions are better than I want $1 million company or I want a $10 million company, and then trying to figure out the how to get there. It's going to be clunky. There's going to be a lot of chaos and challenges, where if you can, like we talked about in a prior episode, if you can think from instead of thinking to, it's like thinking from the destination gives you other solutions working backwards. You start to embody who that person is at $1 million or 10 million, whatever the revenue level is for you. And you start to ask yourself questions that are empowering to realize that result.
Story time.
Story time.
I want to share a story just because I think with what we've covered, it touches on actually having that certitude and confidence despite what you're seeing externally. It ties kind of all of the components we talked about. And it was my very first experience with you that like brought all this together. And basically, for those listening, Stacy, I met Stacy last year and we hosted a women's retreat, the Royal Reclamation. So I had traveled. This was in December of last year. We had an amazing retreat. I went back to Idaho for some business planning with Stacy. This was during Christmas time. And I am Italian, like I've mentioned in a previous episode, and that's just a part of my culture where Christmas Eve is super special to my family. We do the Feast of Seven Fishes. We open all of the presents. I have like 8 nieces and nephews and a big family. Christmas Eve is our big like Christmas day for a number of reasons. So it's super special for me to be there. I've never missed a family Christmas event. And so when I was in Idaho, after all of this had happened, I was getting ready to go back for the holidays. I was supposed to land on Christmas Eve in enough time to go have this dinner with my family, celebrate. I got an alert on my phone that my flight had been canceled, and there were severe thunderstorms and blizzards, and this had impacted hundreds of people. Their lines were down. It was chaos, and instantly my reaction was to go into doing mode, planning mode, figuring out how I am going to get home to be at that dinner table in Christmas festivity, right? But it was not from the aligned place that we talked about earlier. It was from a triggered place. It was from a fearful place. It was from a victim mentality place. It was from a, oh my God, let me force this by trying to go. I was ready to buy a whole nother ticket for like 3,000, or I was trying to forcefully go on 80 different sites. I was trying to like do a bunch of forceful things that were getting me nowhere. I was just spinning my wheels because, like I said, 100 people plus were in the same situation. Things were a little bit chaotic. So Stacy, sat me down and she's like, okay, let's focus on what is happening here. Right now, you're focusing on the process and micromanaging that. What is the desired outcome? You want to be at your dinner table for your family? That's what's going to happen. You are going to be there. I assure you that there's just some complication. This can be easy. Focus on you being at that table and then take your next action. I'm here to support you and whatever that looks like next, but try this conviction and knowingness that you're to be there. Stay on hold for this. We called her Delta Deborah. She made up a name. Call Delta Deborah. She's going to say that everything was just a mistake and you're going to be at your dinner table. So I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. So then I called Delta, was on the phone for a few hours with them, and the lady answers the phone, and of course she said, wow, this is so bizarre. Out of all these canceled flights, all these things, it is just something weird with your ticket. You were supposed to be on an earlier flight, but I have this one seat left on this other flight. You'll get there a little bit later, but yeah, something happened here. This is weird. I've never seen this before. Let me fix this for you. So literally within 2 seconds, the situation was remedied, but then it gets better. I got off the phone and I was like, Stacy, you're never going to believe this. Deborah Delta, you were right. Like, it was just having that conviction. And I was still a little like a new baby cow coming out of the womb, like shaky, believing her. Like I said, when she said that, I was like, yeah, whatever, until I saw that it worked. That's that example of like, I'll believe it when I see it, right? So then the next day when I go to the airport, again, bear in mind, holiday, it is mayhem because they just had all these canceled flights, yada, yada. So I get there super early and I was like, you know what? I'm going to test Stacy's theory about conviction and certitude and really calling in what I want, because the flight I got was later. I'd be walking in at 10. So I'm missing the dinner part. And I really, really want to be at the dinner table. Like, at this was important to me because my mom had been going through some health issues. And I was like, time to me is valuable, and like having these memories, and I want to be at that table. So I get there and I go to Delta. I asked I saw a flight where it was a little bit earlier, get me there around 6, 7. So I was like, let me just try it. Let me get on the wait list. So I go on the wait list, and I went to that gate like 4 hours early. I was the only person at that gate for that flight with the hope and conviction, like, I'm going to wait here. I don't care how long it takes. I believe I'm going to be on this flight and at that table. When I had checked in at that gate, talked to the man, I had never done a wait list before. So I was like, how does this work? Do I give you my name? What do I do here? He's like, no, there are other people here. You'll just see like a running tab of how many people are there. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't, but you just stay here and wait. Long story short, the time comes for boarding for that flight. I see there were 8 people on that wait list, and the waiting area starts dwindling down. Names start coming off the wait list. They're letting people on. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is going good. My name's going to come there. Basically, the wait list had gone to 0. Everyone was boarded the flight, and I was standing in that gate by myself for a second, frozen, like something went wrong here again. So it was in that moment I could have made that choice of certitude, right? It's like, am I truly going to believe that I'm going to be on this flight? Even though my circumstance, they had shut that gate, the gate, I think there's even like a federal fence to open that door once it's like actually closed. They had shut it. The plane was boarded. And I was like, what? So in that split second, I made the decision. I don't know how, because I'm standing here and everything is telling me, nope, I'm going to have to wait for that later flight later. And all of this was for naught. And the man that I had talked to earlier, he saw me and he looked at me and he was just this angel. He knew instantly when we locked eyes, he's like, something didn't go right here because you came here like 4 hours ago and I told you this would be okay. And everyone made the wait list. The lady's yelling at him. She's telling him that I'm not going to board that plane, that I need to go wait. She was very aggressive, but he was like typing away. There was like smoke coming off of his computer screen. He was committed. He was finding a way for this to happen. And the long story short is they opened that door. That lady that was yelling and saying there was no way I was going to make it. There was one seat left. It wasn't even a real seat. It was like the emergency seat, like that goes back to back with the flight attendants. But I assure you, they opened that door and I walked to that gate and I sent Stacy a picture of me sitting at that dinner table with all my nieces and nephews. And Mom, I made it just in the nick of time to sit there at that table. And I was like, it's just one of those defining moments where despite what you see, despite the odds, I meditated for those 4 hours while I waited in that. I just sat in that waiting area, picturing me eating what I was going to eat, me giving my gifts to my family. And it came true. It happened.
And that is how we will end this podcast. There is not another thing I want to add except the how is not your responsibility. It is being crystal clear on what you want and not wavering even until the very last minute. Like in Abby's story, everything externally showed her. It was proof that she didn't see it, therefore she shouldn't believe it. And she chose to believe, and then she saw. And that is the invitation, my friends, that we want to make to you. The how is not your responsibility. Thank you, Abbey. This was fabulous.
Thank you, everyone.
Are you experiencing change and breakthroughs as you listen to Becoming? If so, show us some love and hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and share an episode. I love bringing this content to you each week, and together, listener by listener, we can wake up the world. See you next week.